What's the difference between tolerance and forgiveness? We'll be talking about that in today's 5-minute devotional from John chapter 8, the first 11 verses. They went each to his own house. But Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. Early in the morning he came again to the temple. All the people came to him, and he sat down and taught them. The scribes and Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in adultery. And placing her in the midst, they said to him, "Teacher, this woman has been caught in the act of adultery. Now, in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. What do you say?" They said this to test him, that they might have some charge to bring against him. Jesus bent down and wrote with his finger on the ground. And as they continued to ask him, he stood up and said to them, "Let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone at her." And once more he bent down and wrote on the ground. But when they heard it, they went away one by one, beginning with the older ones, and Jesus was left alone with the woman standing before him. Jesus stood up and said to her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" She said, "No one, Lord." And Jesus said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go, and from now on, sin no more." So, the religious authorities are looking for more excuses to have charges against Jesus, and they find a convenient situation. Somehow, I don't know how you would do this, they caught two people sleeping together that were not married, or one of them was married to somebody else, adultery, and caught them in the very act, apparently, and brought the woman before Jesus. First question, where's the guy? How does he just get away? I don't know. Typical, right? So they bring him before Jesus, and they say, well, the law is clear. The law of Moses says that we should stone her to death. What do you say? Maybe because they know that Jesus is talking about forgiveness of sins, and they want to have some way to be able to pin on him not following the law of Moses, because maybe they suspect that he's going to want to prevent her from being stoned. So Jesus, he writes on the ground. It's a dusty, and so this is something that wasn't all that unusual back then. You didn't have whiteboards, didn't have PowerPoint. Teachers would often write things in the dirt to make a point, and it's one of those questions of the ages. What the heck was Jesus writing? Now, some people think that he was writing down the sins of those who came to bring this woman to be stoned, because the next thing he says is, "Let the one who is without sin cast the first stone." Now, I doubt that one, not because I doubt Jesus' knowledge of the human heart, but I think he was relying on them knowing their own hearts, that they didn't need to have it just written out for them. There's also the possibility, you remember, they were caught in the act of sleeping together. She might have not been fully clothed. Maybe he was like, "Oh, I'm just going to look over here and draw on the ground for a while." I don't know. But in any case, that's one of those great mysteries that it's fun to think about. But his answer, "Let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone at her." And they all slowly left, because none of them were without sin, because that's pretty obvious, right? Anybody looking at themselves should be able to tell that they're not perfect, that they're not without sin. And he looks at the woman, and he asks if anyone's left to accuse her. And he says, "I'm not going to condemn you either. Go and sin no more." So his answer is brilliant, because he doesn't deny that it was a sin. And he doesn't even deny the law of Moses. He just says, "You know what? I think it takes a sinless one to have this kind of moral judgment." and to have this kind of ability to pay for or forgive this sin. So he offers her forgiveness. But forgiveness is different than tolerance, like I mentioned. If he was just tolerating her, he would have said, oh, it's no big deal. Sleep with whoever you want, whenever you want. Doesn't matter what it does to relationships or families. You're fine. Go away. He doesn't say that. But he says, I'm not going to condemn you. Go. Sin no more. But there's even more in there than was spoken that we find out in the rest of the gospel, especially at the end. She was condemned to death. And her sin under the law of Moses should have meant death. And the thing is, somebody actually did die. And you guys know the Sunday school answer, but it was him, right? He died for her sin. And so that is the beauty of the completeness of his forgiveness, that it doesn't diminish the weight of the sins that we make, but he frees us from them.